A man paces across a stone floor in Corinth. Outside, the winter wind blows off the Aegean Sea, rattling the heavy wooden shutters of the room. We think renewing the mind means reading more books, listening to more sermons, memorizing more theology, and finally getting our doctrinal arguments straight, specific words read out loud. They will realize the truth. God is not asking them to upgrade their intellect. He is coming for the entire operating system. The ink dries on the rough papyrus. The English Bibles resting on our laps will eventually render Paul's phrase as the renewing of your mind. But when you look at the actual Greek, the polite academic illusion shatters. The word Paul uses for renewing is the Greek noun anakainosis. It is a shockingly rare word. It appears only twice in the entire New Testament. Its root is kainos, which does not mean something that is simply recent in time. It means something that is completely new in nature. It is not a fresh coat of paint over rotting wood. It is the total demolition and reconstruction of a structure. But the real shock comes with the second word. The word translated as mind is the Greek nous. If Paul simply wanted them to think harder, he had plenty of Greek words to choose from. He could have used dianoia, which means the intellect or the understanding. He could have used phren, which points to cognitive thinking. He uses nous. The nous is not your intellect. It is your moral compass. It is the deep, underlying faculty of perception that decides what is valuable. We treat our brains like search engines. We assume that if we type in the right biblical query, we will get the right life out. What is true? And what is beautiful? It is the engine that drives the human will. To understand how broken the nous is, you only have to rewind the scroll a few feet. In Romans chapter 1, Paul describes a civilization spiraling into absolute chaos. He writes that God finally handed humanity over to a depraved mind. The word he uses there is nous. A depraved nous is not stupid. A Roman engineer with a depraved nous can still design a massive stone aqueduct. A politician with a depraved nous can still deliver a brilliant, highly logical speech in the Senate. Their intellect is perfectly intact, but their moral compass is spinning wildly in the dark. The magnetic north of their soul is completely shattered. They can calculate advanced mathematics, but they cannot recognize basic human dignity. That changes everything about chapter 12. When Paul tells the church to be transformed by the anakainosis of their nous, he is not telling them to read more scrolls. He is telling them their fundamental capacity to perceive reality has to be entirely reconstructed. The nous is not a hard drive waiting for facts. It is a compass demanding a new, true north. Transformation is not an intellectual upgrade. It is a moral recalibration. You cannot fix a shattered compass by tapping the glass. If we struggle with anxiety, we think we just need to memorize a verse about peace. You cannot fix it by reading a manual about magnetic fields. The internal mechanism itself has to be pulled out and replaced. But how does that actual replacement happen if we cannot study our way into a new nous? What is the mechanism of change? The answer is found in the final phrase of Paul's sentence, and it points straight back to the most terrifying landscape in the ancient world. Sand that burns through thin leather sandals. The air is so dry it cracks the lips and coats the throat in a fine layer of dust. This is the Sinai Peninsula. A nation of 2 million former slaves is walking into the absolute silence of a brutal, unforgiving desert. And when Paul finishes his thought in Romans 12:2, he is pointing his readers straight into this desolate wasteland. He tells the church exactly why their minds must be renewed. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing and perfect will. The Greek word Paul uses for testing is dokimazo. It is the language of the ancient metallurgist. It is the violent, necessary process of throwing raw, unrefined gold into a roaring blast furnace. The heat forces the impurities to the surface so they can be scraped away, proving the true nature of the metal underneath. If we struggle with anger, we think we just need to read a book on patience. We think if we can just download the right data. For a Jewish rabbi trained in the Hebrew scriptures, There is only one historical landscape that perfectly defines this kind of testing: the wilderness. Look at the Israelites walking out of Egypt. They possessed all the correct theological data. They had seen the waters of the Red Sea stand up like massive walls of glass. They had the Ten Commandments carved directly into stone tablets. They had the intricate architectural blueprints for the tabernacle. Their intellect was completely informed, but their nous was still calibrated to Egypt. The moment their leather canteens ran dry, the moment their stomachs growled, the moment the physical pressure of the desert touched their skin, their intellectual data evaporated. They immediately demanded to go back to the chains of Pharaoh. Their moral compass was entirely broken, convinced that slavery with a full stomach was better than freedom in the unknown. The wilderness was not a geographical punishment. It was a surgical theater. It was the fiery altar where God slowly, painfully dismantled their Egyptian operating system. You do not learn to approve the will of God by studying a scroll in a comfortable library. You learn it by stepping into a barren place where you have absolutely zero control, where the sun beats down on your neck, and realizing that the manna still falls quietly in the early morning dew. The mind is only renewed when the physical body is placed in a situation of total dependency. Our behavior will automatically change, and yet, it rarely works. You can memorize the entire New Testament and still be crushed by a sudden wave of panic. The compass is forced to reorient itself when the old survival mechanisms are completely stripped away. Testing the will of God is not an academic quiz. It is a crucible. But this raises a terrifying question for those of us living thousands of years later, far away from the sands of Sinai and the altars of Rome. If the mind is only rebuilt on the altar, and the compass is only recalibrated in the fire, what does that mean for the season you are standing in right now? But here is the part I keep coming back to. The caterpillar dissolving in the dark chrysalis, the raw gold blistering in the blast furnace, the living sacrifice choosing to stay against the burning heat of the stone. We spend so much of our lives trying to read our way out of the fire. If you are in a season right now where your life feels entirely out of your control, where the medical diagnosis is terrifying, where the bank account is draining, where the silence in the room feels thick and heavy, you are probably doing what all of us do. You are trying to find the right book. You are searching for the exact podcast episode that will explain the pain away. In the middle of a grocery store, you can know the original Greek etymology of peace and still scream at your family on the way to church. You are trying to download a theological answer that will suddenly make the wilderness feel safe. You buy another journal. You highlight another chapter. You clench your jaw and try to force your brain to stop vibrating with worry. You are treating your mind like a hard drive, but God is treating it like a compass. The heat you are feeling is not a punishment. It is a recalibration. If your nous, your deep, underlying operating system was built in Egypt, it has to be dismantled in the desert. If your moral compass was calibrated by the relentless anxieties and demands of the modern world, it has to be smashed on the altar. You cannot learn surrender from a textbook. You have to be pinned to the stone, the anxiety that wakes you up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m., the crushing weight in your chest when the email arrives, the sudden, violent flash of anger when your plans are interrupted. These are not signs that you need to memorize more scripture. They are the impurities rising to the surface of the gold. They are the old Roman operating system, glitching as the fire finally hits it. We think the goal of the Christian life is to become incredibly smart about God. Information does not equal transformation. Paul was not offering a reading plan. He was diagnosing something. We want to be the Roman philosopher standing safely in the forum, debating ideas. But the text refuses to let us stay there. Paul does not ask for your intellect. He asks for your physical body. He asks you to yield, to stop swinging the hammer, to stop trying to reconstruct your own mind through sheer intellectual force, to stop trying to think your way into peace, to lie down on the altar and let the Spirit do the agonizing, beautiful work of burning away the mud on the lens. Because when the compass finally resets, everything changes. The man paced a cold floor in Corinth, and a letter dismantled an empire of intellect. The philosopher built a massive fortress of logic and his moral compass spun in the dark. The priest lifted a sharp knife in the courtyard, and the altar demanded its violent price. The caterpillar dissolved completely in the chrysalis, and a new form was authored from the outside in. The slaves walked into a barren, burning desert, and their Egyptian minds were finally broken. He was naming a mechanism of human change that most modern Christians completely misunderstand. But if you look closer at the cultural context of first-century Rome, the raw gold blistered inside the roaring blast furnace, and the hidden impurities were pulled to the surface. The living sacrifice laid down on the rough stone, and the fire was allowed to do the work. Same compass, same fire. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the grammar. Paul, standing in that dimly lit room, watching Tertius scratch the Greek word metamorpho into the papyrus. A passive imperative. In order to yield, we spend our entire spiritual lives holding a heavy iron hammer, trying to beat our own character into shape, trying to read our way out of our anxiety, trying to download enough data to finally feel safe. And Paul simply strips the hammer out of our hands. He tells the smartest city in the world to be operated on. If you are in a season where your intellect has hit an absolute wall, where the verses you memorized feel hollow against the panic in your chest, stop trying to think your way out. The altar is not a classroom. It is an operating table. Lay down the theology books for a moment. Lay down the desperate search for the perfect podcast. At the specific, shocking Greek words he forced Tertius to write down, and at the sentence that comes directly before this one. Let your physical body yield to the present moment, and let the fire of the Spirit rewire your compass in the dark. And may the God who has never once been impressed by your intellect, but who deeply loves your surrendered frame, meet you on the stone and carefully, gently, to give you a completely new true north. You start to realize the popular interpretation is fundamentally broken. The mind is not a hard drive waiting for data. It is a lens covered in mud. Inside, the air smells of burning olive oil and damp wool. He dictates out loud, his voice filling the small space. Renewing your mind is not an academic achievement. It is a surgical surrender. To feel the weight of what is actually happening in this text, you have to strip away the centuries of polite, Western academic assumptions. You have to stop viewing the mind as a purely intellectual space. You have to look at the blood on the floor. Because this instruction does not start in a library. It starts on an altar. We are a culture built on upgrades. We update our phones. We download software patches. We install new operating systems while we sleep. When we open the book of Romans, we bring this digital worldview directly into the text. We see the phrase, renew your mind, and we immediately picture a data transfer. We treat the human brain like an empty hard drive. We assume our spiritual struggles, our daily fears, and our moral failures are simply a lack of correct information. We diagnose our anxiety and our anger as mere data deficits. The logic feels bulletproof. Bad inputs create bad outputs. Good inputs create good outputs. So we begin the download. We listen to 3 different theology podcasts while sitting in morning traffic. We drag neon yellow highlighters across the razor-thin pages of our Bibles. We swipe through bite-sized inspirational quotes on glowing glass screens, while a scribe named Tertius furiously scratches a reed pen across a sheet of rough papyrus. He is writing to a city he has never seen. We fill leather-bound journals with blue ink. We memorize ancient historical dates. We chart out the timelines of kings. We consume facts. We think we are renewing our minds. We are really just organizing our ignorance. Because, eventually, the real world breaks in. The doctor calls with the biopsy results. A teenager screams at you across the kitchen island. A boss hands you an empty cardboard box for your desk. In that exact fraction of a second, the intellectual data is completely useless. The memorized verses vanish. The podcast arguments evaporate. Your body reacts with panic, rage, or despair before your brain can recall a single theological fact. This is the tragic flaw of modern Christianity. We have reduced spiritual transformation to an academic exercise. We have turned discipleship into a reading comprehension test. Paul the Apostle is not a university professor. He is a Jewish rabbi writing to a city drowning in its own intellectual arrogance. Rome worshipped the intellect. Roman citizens believed that sheer logic and high philosophy could conquer the savage human condition. Paul knows better. He knows that a brilliantly educated mind can still be a deeply wicked mind. He knows that raw intelligence does not produce peace. He knows that acquiring biblical trivia does not automatically rewire your nervous system. The mind is not an empty bucket waiting for facts. He is writing to Rome. It is the center of the known world. A city obsessed with philosophical intellect, built on brutal military dominance. It is a shattered lens, distorting reality. You cannot fix a shattered lens by shining more light on it. You cannot cure a blind man by aggressively describing the color blue. You have to replace the glass. Transformation is not the addition of knowledge. It is the crucifixion of perspective. But to understand how that actually happens, you have to read the sentence Paul dictates just seconds before this famous command. Because Romans 12:2 does not exist in a vacuum. It is the second half of a thought, and the first half has nothing to do with thinking. A priest stands in a courtyard in the ancient world. The air is thick, choking on the smoke of roasting meat, the tang of metallic blood, and the heavy scent of burning fat. The stone altar is slick, the heat of the fire radiating aggressively against his skin. For thousands of years, across Jewish and pagan cultures alike, this is exactly what the word sacrifice means. A dead animal, a sharp knife, a sudden, violent end. When Paul dictates the beginning of Romans chapter 12, this is the exact, visceral imagery he drags into the room. He tells the church in Rome, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, and currently running on the blood of gladiators and slaves." The people receiving this letter are living in the absolute epicenter of human ego. Notice the sequence. He does not start with the intellect. He starts with the flesh. He starts on the altar. Modern readers instinctively want to skip verse 1. We want to bypass the altar and jump straight into verse 2. Straight to the renewing of the mind. Because thinking feels incredibly safe. Thinking is comfortable. You can analyze abstract theology while sitting quietly in a padded chair, holding a warm mug, but you cannot climb onto an altar without giving up your autonomy. The Christians in Rome know exactly what an altar looks like. The capital city is filled with them. To a first-century Roman, a sacrifice was a simple, brutal transaction. You bring a bull to the temple of Jupiter. You slit its throat. You give the gods what they demand. And you go home. The animal is dead. The debt is paid. But Paul demands an absolute paradox, a living sacrifice. He is describing a creature that climbs onto the fire and chooses to stay there, even when it has the physical strength to crawl off. He is telling them that before their thoughts can ever change, their fundamental allegiance must be yielded. You cannot retain control of your life, your body, your daily decisions, and expect a new mindset to simply be downloaded from heaven. And as the man paces the room, dictating the 12th chapter of his letter, he gives them an instruction about how to survive it. The altar is not a classroom. It is an execution block. Paul anchors the transformation of the mind directly to the surrender of the physical body. The intellect cannot be repaired until the human will stops fighting for control. Only when you are laying on that altar, fully surrendered, does the famous command of verse 2 even become possible. But when Paul finally gives that command, when he tells them to be transformed, he uses a verb that completely shatters our modern obsession with self-improvement. There is a grammatical trap hidden in the original Greek, and it changes who is actually doing the work. We love to fix things. We buy the leather planners. We set the digital alarms. We track our daily habits on glowing glass screens. We approach spiritual growth like a home renovation project. We hold the hammer. We swing the heavy iron. We try to knock down the walls ourselves. We listen to the motivational speakers. We clench our jaws. We white-knuckle our behavior. We think transformation is an active verb. We assume God expects us to do the heavy lifting. We assume it is our job to rebuild our own character through sheer discipline, but the Greek text refuses our help. When Paul says, "be transformed," he uses a very specific verb. The Greek word is metamorpho. You recognize the root. You learned it in elementary biology. Metamorphosis. A complete, the fundamental change of structural form. He tells them to be transformed by the renewing of their minds. You have heard this verse. You have probably seen it printed on coffee mugs. But Paul does not write it as an active command. He writes it as a passive imperative. A passive command is a linguistic paradox. It is an order to allow something to be done to you. Imagine a surgeon saying, "Be operated on." You are not holding the scalpel. You are yielding to the knife. You cannot transform yourself. You can only submit to being transformed. If the endless cycle of trying to manufacture your own spiritual growth is leaving you exhausted, you are exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the caterpillar does not strive. It does not read a manual. It does not attend a seminar on how to build wings. It simply spins a chrysalis. It yields to the dark, tight space. It literally dissolves into a biological liquid. The transformation happens to it. The change is authored from the outside in. This is the reality of the passive imperative. You do not renew your own mind by willpower. You place your physical body on the altar. You lay against the rough stone. You let the fire do the work. Transformation is not an achievement. It is a surrender. But we are still left with the central problem, framed on living room walls, or plastered on bumper stickers. And you probably assume you know exactly what it means. What exactly is being transformed? Our English translations simply say, the mind. But the Greek language is far more precise. It splits the mind into different functions. If the mind is not just our intellectual database, what is it? The answer is hiding in the two specific Greek words Paul links together. And they reveal exactly what is actually broken inside of us. The oil lamp sputters on the wooden table, casting long, erratic shadows against the plaster walls of the rented room in Corinth. Tertius, the scribe, dips his reed pen into a small clay pot of black ink. You can hear the harsh, rhythmic scratching of the tip against the rough fibers of the papyrus. Paul stops pacing the cold stone floor. He knows exactly the kind of culture this letter is about to enter. Rome is a city obsessed with the power of the human mind. The Roman elite are trained in rhetoric, schooled in rigorous logic, and steeped in Stoic philosophy. They firmly believe that if a man can just gain enough knowledge, he can master his darkest passions. They believe that reason is the ultimate weapon against the chaos of human emotion. The philosophers standing in the Roman forums argue that the intellect is a fortress, and that if you build the walls high enough with education, nothing can breach it. This is the air the Christians in Rome breathe every single day. Most people assume it is a call to study. We live in an information age, so we naturally read an information bias into the ancient text. They are constantly tempted to turn the gospel into just another school of high philosophy. They are tempted to believe that following Jesus simply means thinking cleaner, more logical thoughts than their pagan neighbors. But Paul is about to dictate a phrase that completely dismantles the Roman worldview. He is not offering a new philosophical framework. He is announcing a hostile takeover. He knows that human reason, left to itself, is fundamentally compromised. A brilliant mind can rationalize profound cruelty without skipping a beat. The Roman emperors who casually order the slaughter of thousands in the Colosseum are highly educated men. They read classical poetry. They study advanced mathematics. They understand complex architectural engineering. And yet, their minds are entirely dark. Intelligence is not a substitute for redemption. Paul turns back to Tertius, ready to deliver the second half of the command. He needs to tell this young church exactly what must happen to their compromised minds. But he bypasses all the standard Greek vocabulary for learning, studying, or acquiring wisdom. He ignores the polished words that a Greek philosopher would use to describe intellectual enlightenment. Instead, he speaks two words into the dimly lit room. They are words that do not belong in a polite classroom. They are words that carry the raw weight of a demolition site. And when the church in Rome finally unrolls this heavy scroll and hears these two